All right, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, skip to the second slide. Sorry, I'm feeling under the weather. It's like if I'm a handphone, my battery level is only 5%. But I'll try my best. Forgive me if I look at my slides. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. It's great to see all of you. My name is Jag, partner of Safeheron, and also the Exco of the Digital Asset Association. Lovely to have all of you. In the morning when I came in, some people remarked to me, wow, you guys do it in the church. Is somebody getting married? Hey, TradFi and Web3 is getting married. Okay, so it's a marriage made in heaven, right? So again, great to see you guys. So today, I'm going to speak about the role of custody in institutional confidence. Earlier, Hester Pierce spoke from a public sector and from a regulatory perspective, and I'm going to speak from a private sector and from a tech provider perspective. All right. Next. Okay, so before I go into the details, let me share a little bit more about Safeheron. Right. Since we launched by the way, we are an institutional-grade MPC self-custody provider. We serve mainly institutions from asset managers to banks, as well as exchanges. And since we launched about 3 years ago, we have about more than $1.5 billion worth of assets under self-custody at its peak. Right. So we are a self-custody provider. We are not a custodian. And we process more than $150 billion worth of assets securely, right? And we have up to 10 billion in month high in terms of transactions, and we never ever had a single case of account compromise or asset loss. So long may that continue, right? We currently serve about 170 institutional clients, and that also puts us in a very good position to share about what some of our clients are concerned about. All right, so let me just start off with the premise that custody and wallets are like the bank account of Web3, right? You need wallets, regardless of whether you're a payment institutions or you're an exchange or you're a stablecoin issuer. You will need wallets in your business operations. Your customers and your users will need wallets to interact with you. So wallets are really like the gateway to Web3, if you will. Right? For institutions, custody is the foundations of trust. And if it's weak, serious capital would not go on chain. And without confidence, institutional adoptions cannot grow. Right? So from a client's conversations with us, there are mainly three concerns that I want to share about. Right? Number one is security. Second is efficiency. And third is compliance. So let's go through each of these pillars. Right, the first concern is always about security, and unfortunately in this space right now, hacks is still very, very commonplace. In fact, like just last week, one of the DeFi projects, the founder contacted me, and then he was telling me, their project just got compromised to the tune of 11 billion. So somehow their multi-sig wallet got compromised, and it was like, hey, please put me in touch with the Singapore Police Force. I need their help to speak to Tether and give the information to Tether so that they can freeze the attacker's wallet. It's like, okay, he's so frantic. And you know what? Just before my speech, he gave me a call, but I couldn't pick up his phone. All right. So unfortunately, again, security is still a big problem, right? And our approach to security, it's always about having a multi-layer security. So you can picture it like an onion. Even if one layer is compromised, you have multiple layers, right, to secure your assets. And at the core of what we do, we implement MPC, or what we call multi-party computation, and TE, trusted execution environment, to make sure that we mitigate a single point of failure on the private key, and as well as to harden security on sensitive data. We also implement, a robust zero trust architecture that's in line with the mantra, don't trust, always verify. So every major action that we take, be it transferring of funds or adding new member, right, there will always have to be a process, right? And we have features like what you see is what you sign, a strong policy engine for different approval scenarios, and so on, which I won't go into the details. And these are very important starting points that I'd like to raise, because if you look at the Bybit hack that happened earlier this year, it was by far the largest hack in history. that was a case of social engineering, among other factors. You could see that tech alone isn't enough. Right? They were using cold wallets. And today I'll just have a very quick chat with MAS. And we were saying, cold wallet doesn't necessarily mean it's safe, right? A lot of people assume it to be safe. You actually need people, process, and technology to be working in tandem. So let me just show you quickly how we put this into practice. Right, so first off, we start with people, right? People, we involve users, make sure that they are well-trained on the prospect of, make sure that they are well-trained in the perspective of governance, be aware of good security hygienes and good security practices. The most important is the mindset. And the other part is about process. From an institutional perspective, to enforce good governance, we make sure that we encourage users to have a multi-party approval, having a maker-checker process. So just in case if one person makes mistakes, there are other parties, be able to help to verify, and make sure that any errors will not lead to any devastating losses. It's really critical to ensure that there's always check and balances, right? And that there's always supervisory oversight. And then the second part is, or rather the third part, is that we use technology. I've earlier already mentioned about the use of TEE, how we use hardware-isolated enclave to protect sensitive data, including the key shards, whitelisted addresses, and so on. And on top of it, we must always have constant defenses against real-world threats. I'm referring to phishing attacks, address poisoning, man-in-the-middle attacks, and we could use advanced encryption as well as detection to make sure that we know the threats early and that we mitigate the risk early. Also important is that systems, we want them to be aligned according to industry standards, and I'd just like to namely ISO 27001 as well as SOC 2 Type 1, Type 2 in relation to data privacy and security. Right? And what we also think it's critical as well, it's in the area of Web3, open source cryptography, especially on code, it's a great way, right, to gain clients' trust because anyone can then audit you permissionlessly, right? They don't have to get our permission, to view our codes. Now, once clients are satisfied on security, then the next part is about efficiency. Institutions don't want security that can slow them down, right? They want to be fast, right? They want to be simple, you want it to be cost efficient. And also like one of the features that we put in place for our clients is that especially most of the stable coins right now happens on the Tron chain. I know that maybe Tron may not be the most favorite chain of most of the people over here, right? But in the reality, Tron has most of the stablecoin transaction flows, and we have this Tron Energy Rental that can help our clients to save up to 45%, of their fees. And in fact, many of our clients say, hey, this is a big game changer for them, because it's not just about running the business, getting clients, but I also want to cut costs. In fact, we spoke to one of the payment institutions that they spend up to 1 million in gas fee annually. So if they can save about 500K worth of gas fee, that's certainly no chump change. And of course, features like the ability to automate consolidation, ability to automate gas top-ups, these are features that are also very useful, especially for institutions like exchanges and payments. Now, beyond this, efficiency also means better liquidity access to less friction, that's why it's also very important to talk about connectivity. Institutions don't want fragmented system. Now, if you are in like an OTC payments, you have experience working with different wallets, custodians, different platforms, different touch points, and different accounts. So the entire process of managing assets, can be very, very painful. So now, imagine if you can have a single unified platform that can link exchanges to wallets and OTCs with banks where you can do your on-ramp and off-ramps. Hey, wouldn't that be very convenient? So that's having a good network, right? AKA, like a SWIFT on crypto, is what we think is going to help bring more institutions into this space. again, very critical to make sure that we want to remove friction and simplify the operation for institutional stakeholders. Now we come to the third pillar, compliance. So for institutions, especially regulated entities, where compliance is non-negotiable, right? Especially for our licensed entities in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and the US. That's why we integrate AML, anti-money laundering, and know your transaction checks, and soon having travel rule implementation, integration to our network as well, so that users can proactively manage risks and also to avoid contaminations and funds, and the hassle of then having to deal with the regulator, police, if you inadvertently, interact with somebody that, that are not so savvy, right? And in addition, we make sure that every action that we take on the system and the back end, whether you are, changing a policy, or you're adding member, or you're adding a new personnel that you want to back up for your private keys, you always make sure that the systems has full audit trail, so that it's vital for traceability and accountability, right? What we want to reach is a standard whereby compliance is built in and embedded in every transaction that we process, and the compliance itself, it's always a built-in standard in whatever things we do. My second last slide, right? In our experience, we speaking to many different clients and institutions, we know there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to custody. Flexibility, is very important. It matters, especially for different institutions with different risk requirements, with different operational requirements, right? And right now, there are three main models of custody deployment methods and setups. SaaS, the most common, software as a service, right? Which basically most of the infrastructure is hosted on the vendor side, so it's secure, it's cost competitive, and you go to markets quickly, right? It's very fast to set up. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, on-premise. This is very ideal for institution that wants their own white label custody. I was just speaking to some of the banks earlier, right? They want to have full control over the infrastructure. I want to have full data privacy. When we speak to some banks in Kazakhstan, in Korea, they say, okay, my infrastructure has to be in the jurisdiction where I'm licensed. So on-prem white label solution would be very useful, especially for data residency concerns, and as well as data privacy as well, because some institutions may not want their vendor to see how many wallets they have, what's the custodial volume, what's the transfer volume, they want it to be kept private. So that's where on-prem can come in, and then in the middle ground is the hybrid, where you can have a mixture of both certain components of the infrastructure, maybe the not so critical components can be hosted on the vendor side, but the most critical parts of the setup, for example, the key shards, right, can be entirely hosted on the client's premise, right? So we want to reiterate, there is no right or wrong answer. It all depends on the institutional requirements and making sure that they can meet their compliance wherever they are. So in closing, if I have to bring it all together, I would say institutions will only move trillions. Actually, we are already like 2024, number of stable coins volume is already in the trillions, but if you want to move multiple levels of trillions and above trillions, I don't know what's the term for above trillions, how you call it, then you need to have security and efficiency and compliance to converge, because custody is not just about safekeeping, it's also the trust anchor for global institutional adoption. It's the bridge between rapid innovation, between Web3 and TradFi, the marriage which I alluded, in the beginning, and also the foundation of sustainable finance. And, may our industry see the next quantum leap, in institutional adoptions, once we get the foundation right. And with that, thank you very much.